Allies or Enemies by Peachiibunnii, Chapter 5. He had to get Pearl. He didn't even bother to look at Hawkeye before starting his run to find his sister. He had one job, and that was to keep his family safe. He didn't get very far before strong arms enveloped his waist, easing him back with a gentle pull. They didn't help, only letting the panic sink in further. Whoa, slow down. Hawkeye's voice was gentle and warm, easily able to calm any normal person down in a high-stress situation. Unfortunately for him, if she got hurt and were taken to a hospital, they'd be found out immediately, and Grian couldn't have that. I know you want to find your sister, but it's No, don't fucking touch me. You don't understand, Grian cried, struggling against the hero's hands to let him go. She could be hurt, he began, the restriction of being held down not helping his panic. The adrenaline in his body was kicking in, rushing his instincts to open his wings, to fly, to escape, anything to get away. He couldn't do that here. With all his restraint, he forced himself to contain those urges as he clawed at the hero's hands instead. Scar held him firmly, not wanting to see the other run into danger. Grian, on the other hand, was fully prepared and ready to take a hit if it meant knowing his family was safe. If he was hurt, they'd easily patch him up and be fine, but if Pearl got hurt, he'd lose his mind. Either of his family members would send him into a spiral. Like the day Jimmy got sick after days of being on the surface, and Grian didn't know what to do. I know, Hawkeye tried again, breaking Grian from his spiraling thoughts. His grip of Grian becoming harder to hold as the blonde tossed and turned with each thought running through his head. Except he didn't know. A beloved superhero by all didn't know what it was like growing up in fear or on the streets, living day by day until meeting scientists and trading traumatic events for shelter and food. This superhero may have a family, but he didn't know what Grian was going through, and the thought of a human understanding him was unfathomable. You don't, Grian screamed finally, his mind fully panicking. He turned to Hawkeye, looking him in the eyes behind his visor. You don't understand, and you never will, he snapped, tears forming in his eyes. The hero looked stunned, almost in shock at Grian's words. He felt the hero's grip loosen up, and he took the chance to break free. Immediately, he started running out of the hero's arms back into the street filled with smoke. He didn't care to look back or see what Hawkeye's game plan was. If he had, he would have seen a very confused and worried hero, but it wasn't in his mental checklist to check his reaction. He looked around quickly, scanning the streets for any sign of her red hoodie. Pearl, he yelled, continuing to run out of the road and past the smoke to see a few police cars already parked. He looked around, ignoring them as they tried to approach him, running down a free road. Pearl, please be alright, Grian yelled, scanning his surroundings yet again until he ended up at the corner. He turned around briefly to see an officer trying to follow him, absolutely uncaring for what anyone had to say to him. For now, he just kept running around the corner and block until he made it back to the coffee shop, where he finally spotted her, on the corner with a few other people, one being Jimmy of all people. The amount of relief that flooded his body when he saw both of his family members safe and out of harm's way. Pearl turned to spot Grian, turning her body towards him. Grian! Her face lit up. He ran to her, immediately pulling her into one of the biggest hugs of her life. He rarely gave his family big hugs like this, but it was warranted considering the amount of stress he'd just gone through. From this angle, she could hear his heart pounding in his chest. She closed her arms and pressed her head into his shoulder. He pet the back of her hair and pressed a hand between her shoulder blades. He slowly reciprocated the hug, one arm wrapping around Grian's waist, while the other pressed between his shoulder blades, a sign of trust and comfort from loved ones in avian heritage. Jimmy must have been able to read the situation, because after a few seconds, he stepped closer to wrap an arm around Grian's shoulders, planting a hand to his hair to gently stroke Grian's hair. His other arm wrapped around Pearl's waist, pulling them closer to his chest since he was the tallest. After what felt like a good minute, Grian was the first to let up, raising his hands to place them on Pearl's shoulders. He had semi-wet eyes and dried tears on his face as he spoke. Don't ever do that again, he whispered to her, seeing her own tears form. Reporting and filming is one thing, after it's over, but being so close during the attacks. Grian trailed off, raising his arms to gently stroke down her hair. What would I have done if I lost you? He whispered. Pearl's eyes glossed over as she began to cry, sighing softly. I'm sorry. This job means so much to me. She paused and rubbed her face gently. I forget what can happen if we're found out, she whispered. Grian sighed, smoothing her hair down before kissing her forehead. Don't ever do that again, he muttered, reaching up to rub his eyes under his glasses. He finally turned to look at Jimmy and gestured to his cousin. What are you even doing here? He asked. Pearl perked up then. Oh, I invited him. She smiled softly. I thought it'd be nice to have the whole family together for a little bit and see each other again, she explained. Jimmy nodded, looking Grian over. You're, not looking too great there, bud. Jimmy smiled, though, wanting to try and lighten the mood. Apologies. I thought my sister had died, and I wasn't exactly in the best mindset to deal with things. Grian sighed, his head already aching from all the stress he'd gone through in such a short time. Pearl was right. He needed a break. A day to relax and just lay down, rest, sleep, catch up on work at his own pace. Maybe you should take tomorrow off, Pearl whispered, reaching out to touch Grian's shoulder before drawing her hand back. She looked up to see Hawkeye approaching quickly beside the blonde, her eyes widening. Hawkeye? She began. Grian tensed up, the hairs on his neck standing up. Some of the panic came back in that moment, his jaw clenching shut as he turned to glance at the hero. Hawkeye seemed a little out of breath, raising his hand to stop her. Please, I just came to apologize, he spoke, turning his gaze to the blonde. Hawkeye cleared his throat and hesitated as he met the blonde's eyes. Having seen Grian scream and act out in such a fearful state, Scar's view on him was askew. No longer did he see calm and collected Grian, who was quiet and reserved, had his life together, overworked but fun. He now saw his friend, caring for his only family members, stressed and in dire need of a break. He watched one of his friends have a panic attack. He was more focused on Grian's safety than finding Pearl himself. He was biased and let that opinion outweigh the person in potential immediate danger. I'm sorry for preventing you from searching for your sister. I was focused on your safety and was trying to prevent you from running into the scene instead of just going in myself, Scar spoke, growing behind his opaque visor. I was prioritizing one victim of this attack over another who could have been hurt. I shouldn't have tried to prevent you from helping her, but I don't regret trying to at least save one person. That doesn't mean I should have handled the situation as I did, and for that, I'm sorry. Grian didn't know what to say, having just received an apology from the biggest airheads he'd ever met. The Hawkeye he knew was arrogant and loud, full of himself, and in all honesty, a little stupid. For him to apologize and admit his wrongdoings to Grian himself was something Grian had never expected. Pearl pulled him from his thoughts, brushing his shoulder. The famous superhero just gave you an apology, and you're staring into space like a jerk. Say something, Pearl whispered, getting a light chuckle out of Hawkeye. Sorry, Grian began, ignoring the small groan Pearl gave immediately afterwards. He cleared his throat and sighed softly, glancing from Pearl to Hawkeye. I guess I just don't know what to say. I accept your apology. I'm sorry as well for lashing out and yelling at you like that, he confessed, wondering what his family was thinking when they shared a look. I was panicked. I don't have any excuse for saying those things because I don't know your life behind the mask, or if you do have family and understand what it's like. I shouldn't have said that either, he mumbled, knowing an apology needed to be given. Hawkeye smiled, gently placing a hand on Grian's shoulder. Grian cringed internally at the touch, despite despising people touching him. No need to apologize. The human brain can't help but react to panic in ways we can't control. I can tell your family means a lot to you, and regardless of what happened, I'm happy you're all safe. Let's celebrate. I've got to post this on my blog and in my articles. Scott's gonna love this. Pearl smiled wildly as at Grian and reached up to put an arm around her brother's shoulders, pulling him down while she brought her phone up to hold above their heads. Grian looked at her phone to see Hawkeye in the reflection, smiling gently and raising a hand to wave at the camera. It made Green smile as well, though he didn't really enjoy the photo. He did allow it. Jimmy patted off to the side, crossing his arms briefly. I see how it is. Exclude me, he half joked, turning his head in fake anger. Pearl laughed, letting go of her brother to hug their cousin instead. Green rubbed the back of his neck as he watched them, wondering what would have happened if they had been discovered. Green thought back to hazy memories of barefoot nights and hiding their siblings in their makeshift house on the nights people would come to take him. He reflexively grabbed at his arms, where he remembered needles and pumps in his arms. The memories were old, long forgotten to the point even he couldn't piece some memories together. He thought about the pain, the stinging in his body afterwards, and what it might have been like to switch places. He thought of Pearl in his place, and he felt his stomach drop, his body having a visceral reaction to the thought alone. He thought he may be sick, being reprimanded by their guardians even for breaking one of the few rules he'd been given. Don't let anything happen to them. Green knew the consequences of failing this rule. The thought of it and the potential reality were far different, though. A large hand on his back pulled him from his thoughts. He jumped, his head turning a little as he realized the hero was still beside the group. He was rubbing gentle stripes up and down his back, right between his hidden appendages. It felt nice. His whole body shivered. He stared at his siblings, making sure they weren't watching as he allowed this to happen. His entire body was tense, but somehow relaxed as the other continued to stroke that soft spot, speaking quietly to him. Green? The hero asked again, finally pulling the blonde out of his haze. Hey, you don't look that good. Are you alright? Just shaken up after everything? Hawkeye asked, his hand stopping his motion to rest between his shoulder blades. Green sighed through his nose, his shoulders relaxing. His back felt fuzzy and warm, his wings practically begging to be let out under his skin. He shouldn't selfishly indulge in this behavior, especially from an egotistical loudmouth government worker. He turned so his back was pulled away, looking at the hero. Yeah, just overthinking, he lied, taking the easy way out. The hero seemed a little disappointed Green had pulled away. He smiled nonetheless, settling his arm back at his side. I can understand how traumatizing and scary situations like this can be. Maybe you should take a couple days to yourself and your family until you feel better, the hero suggested. Green cringed at the thought of being in a room with his family for more than a couple of hours. He looked at them, play fighting on the street, and made a face. He quickly changed it to a fake smile and looked at the hero. You're right, I should, he lied. Like the superhero is going to be aware of if Green goes to work or not. Shouldn't you be off to talk with the police? Green cut in suddenly, glancing behind the hero to gesture to the street, still somewhat smoking and on fire. Hawkeye turned and nodded softly. Take care, and please take care of yourself, he said, before he bounded off in the direction of the police cars. Green watched him go before letting his whole body deflate finally. From the adrenaline, lack of sleep, and relaxing way someone had rubbed his back, he felt lightheaded and in need of sleep. A headache kicked in, rubbing at his temples. Pearl, would you mind if we staged this intervention back at one of our apartments? He asked quietly. Pearl noticed his demeanor and tone, stopping her roughhousing with Jimmy, and nodded. Of course. It was rare Pearl saw him so out of it or overworked. Scratch that. It was rare she didn't see him masking his exhaustion. Let's go gather our things and head home. I can make tea at home for you, she beamed, taking his arm to lead him back to the apartment while Jimmy gathered their papers from inside. Green barely remembered the walk home, occasionally becoming aware of the fact he was walking. He only really became conscious when Jimmy helped him to sit down on his couch, suddenly very aware of the fact he had just walked for 10 minutes and didn't remember any of it. It didn't scare Green per se, but he knew it was out of the ordinary and probably not good. Could you? He looked at Jimmy, finding it hard to ask or speak his mind. I think I want you both to stay here tonight, Green bursted out, staring at the table. Pearl looked at him from the kitchen counter and bit her lip. Jimmy glanced over his shoulder at her before turning to smile at his cousin. "We're here for you," Jimmy finally said, rubbing the space between the blonde's back. Grin rarely let Jimmy touch him there. In fact, he rarely even let Pearl, and that says a lot considering how much closer they were than to Jimmy. Grin allowed the other to comfort him. If he were honest, he wanted nothing more than to curl up beside his cousin like how he used to let Jimmy do as kids. He was unsure why the sudden urge to be so affectionate had come over him. If he did, though, he'd never hear the end of it from the other two. He didn't want to get up, but he knew he needed to change clothes eventually. He shifted and glanced at Jimmy. "I'm going to change into something nicer. Do you want to borrow something?" he asked, knowing his clothes more than likely wouldn't fit his taller cousin. Pearl butted in, setting a mug of Green's tea on the coffee table. "Oh, I want to steal your clothes," she interrupted, racing the others into Green's room. It wasn't much of a race, considering the two stayed on the couch, but if it were one, she definitely would have won. Green laughed softly and gestured, leading the way to his bedroom. They ended up taking turns going through his shirts and sleep pants, making fun of him practically before each getting dressed in privacy. They forced Jimmy to go last and wait in the hall. Green left first, pleased Jimmy didn't leave him alone until Pearl had come out. The shorts were a little big, but she claimed them as her own for the night and encouraged Green to bundle up on the couch with her. By the time they'd gotten back, Green's tea was still hot and ready to at least sip on. "Oh, let's ooh, the, oh, let's close the curtains. I want to let my wings breathe a little. Do you?" she asked, getting up to close his curtains and turn the TV on. Green thought it over, worried his family would berate him for not cleaning his wings and being so messy with them as of lately. Although, if any night were a night to relax, it would be today. He shifted to stand and go change his shirt to a shirt with holes in the back for his wings. He opened them in the privacy of his bedroom, knowing the process can be somewhat gruesome. Jimmy emerged from the bathroom, Green's pajama pants fitting alright, besides the fact that they didn't reach his ankles. He saw the look on Green's face before squinting. Say anything you want, but I'm still taller, he laughed at the other, setting his clothes on the living room table. He already had his wings out, a little smaller than Pearl and Green's, but a fair size for his body and build. Unfortunately, there were no shirts that could fit him, so he was forced to go without one. "Yeah, well, my wings are bigger, so there." Green brought back the argument from so many years ago. But before Jimmy could make a comeback, Pearl interrupted. "Well, that doesn't mean much when they're all messy and dirty, now does it?" she asked, looking at the blonde. They all broke into laughter, each of their giggles filling the room. Green was the first to break, moving to sit on the couch, folding his wings behind him. He saw the look Pearl gave him as she sat down, crossing her arms. He didn't really feel up to having them deep cleaned tonight. It took hours, and none of them needed to stay up late just to do that. "I don't want them cleaned today," he broke the silence, which made her pout, but she respected it. "Another time. You'll have to let me eventually, unless you want to get sick," she mumbled, softly, moving to sit with her legs in Green's lap so she could lay on the couch. One wing hanging off the side, the other curling around her like a blanket. Green allowed this, settling in his own spot before turning to lay one wing off the back of the couch and the other to cover himself, and some of Pearl's leg. Jimmy was lucky and tall enough to be able to have both of his wings drape over the back of the couch. Without warning, Green moved to lay his head on Jimmy's shoulder, the only way he could lay comfortably with his wings out. He curled up easily while watching TV. He didn't even know the show or what was playing, but being able to be with his family like this once again mellowed him out. It wasn't often he let his walls down, even for his family. Green slid a hand behind Rian's one wing just to get his shoulder comfortable before settling his fingers on the space between his wings. He gently rubbed his fingers over the area, and within seconds, Grin was making small chirping noises out of comfort. He wasn't very conscious until Jimmy giggled, making Grin move on his chest. He didn't even open his eyes when he spoke. Shut up and keep going, he grumbled, feeling his cousin's fingertips once again melt the tension in his spine. It had been so long since he'd had a day to relax and sit in comfort, although he didn't ask it often, or in years to be exact. He did enjoy quality time with his family. He normally fell asleep by accident at a desk while working, but tonight was easily the best night's sleep of his life, sleeping in the comfort of his family's presence while some random show played in the background of their peaceful lives. That feels like foreshadowing. What do you mean, peaceful lives? I'm gonna hope for the best, yeah. So that is the end of chapter 5. Yeah, chapter 5. Hope you guys are enjoying it. I love this. I think this is my favorite series that's going on right now. So I love it so much, genuinely. Anyway, I will hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me what you thought in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.